Governor Sherrill has now signed her first state budget. Questions remain, though, about what the spending plan means for New Jersey's long-term financial health. New Jersey Policy Perspective is a nonpartisan think tank whose senior policy analyst, Peter Chen, served on Governor Sherrill's transition team. He joins us now as part of our Under the Dome series. Peter, it's great to see you. Thanks so much for talking to us. I want to get your high-level reaction to the governor, to the budget that was finalized, signed into law by Governor Sherrill. Let's start with, what did you like about it?
Well, I think this budget took an important step towards bringing the state closer to fiscal stability, while continuing to support programs that help everyday New Jerseyans, and showed how we can balance progressive values with fiscal responsibility moving forward. So along those lines, the expansion of the child tax credit, the expansion of funding for the Deportation and Detention Defense Initiative, as well as much needed reforms to state New Jersey and to some corporate tax loophole closure, has helped to keep the state in more fiscal balance moving forward.
Some have been very critical of that deportation funding, saying that the state cut hundreds of thousands in spending for nonprofits, from cancer research to various nonprofits that are out there meeting healthcare needs and social needs. What do you say to that criticism?
Well, the New Jerseyans are New Jerseyans regardless of where they were born. We live in a state where a substantial portion of the population was born outside the United States. And a ramp up, an increase in deportation and detention activity hurts New Jersey. And when we think about a state that includes all of its residents, that means ensuring that all of its residents can stay. How many times have we heard that people are fleeing New Jersey? Here are people who want to stay in New Jersey, and they deserve legal representation in order to do so.
I want to talk about what criticism you have of the budget. I know that you've raised a couple concerns, and one of them we spoke about just the day after the budget address was delivered. You came on with Michelle Sakurka from the New Jersey Business and Industry Association to talk about concerns around this Medicaid fee that at the time was being proposed for businesses employing folks on Medicaid. That did go through. How do you feel about that?
We continue to have serious concerns about whether the fee is going to potentially deter people from using Medicaid. And some exemptions were added to the law, which create exemptions for part-time, seasonal employees, new employees, that could potentially create downstream effects where a business might say, okay, well, then I'm going to convert this full-time employee to a part-time employee, and now I don't have to pay the fee for them. So, we remain concerned that there are some unintended consequences of what sounds like a good idea. But the broad issue that we're facing as a state is we're going to be losing people off of Medicaid because of changes in federal law, right? The work requirements and other changes in the law are going to force people off of Medicaid and become uninsured. What's the solution that the state has to raise the insured rate, ensure that everyone has access to healthcare coverage? We haven't seen exactly what the plan is for that. And the money raised from this is also unstable. The Office of Legislative Services put out a fiscal note for this, which showed projected $150 million in fiscal year 2027, but only $22 million or $23 million in fiscal year 2028. So that means the next year, the bottom falls out of the cost of this, the revenue generated from this program, and it might not even generate the revenue that's hoped for as companies respond. So we remain concerned that this is potentially even going to dissuade people from using Medicaid, and continue to think that there are better ways to fund Medicaid that involve more broad-based taxation on corporations and employers more broadly,
rather than these very targeted types of fees. You also, I know, take issue with the supplemental spending bill that was approved that actually didn't go towards the next fiscal year, but was allocated to the fiscal year 26. Let me just ask you, what are your concerns there with first the spending, and then we're going to go process?
Well, none of the spending items necessarily, jump out as particularly egregious. I think the main issue is a process one that, when the budget passes, it's understood that it's a forward-looking document. there are going to be changes. Some charges are going to come up that were not expected, but a lot of the things in the supplemental feel like they were to be expected, right? Some of it's like World Cup spending. Well, people knew that there was going to be state spending on World Cup. So why is it coming in the supplemental and not in the original budget, right? So I think because it's, again, pushed through at the last minute along with next year's budget with very little time for public debate, and oftentimes this is money that's already been spent, and the supplemental appropriation bill is simply a formality. Maybe it shouldn't be a formality, right? Maybe we should be thinking about what the supplemental appropriation looks like before the end of June, closing out the whole year. This has been a problem in prior years as well. There was an additional supplemental appropriation at the end of the lame duck session in January that similarly pushed through a number of spending items that might not have been approved had they had a full normal bill passage cycle with committee hearings and debate.
The governor did set aside about 10% of the overall spending. There's about a $6 billion surplus. It's a $60.7 billion budget. Is that where you believe the state needs to be in terms of surplus? And if not, what changes would you recommend?
So I think I want to phrase that it's not exactly a surplus, right? It's more aptly described as our cash reserves, right? It's our savings account. And so a 10% that's like the minimum of what we should have on hand for a recession, right? The problem is that number is getting smaller, right? We were at 10 billion a few years ago. Now we're down to 6 billion, and we still have a structural deficit, which means we have more expenditures than we have revenues. That means that number is going to keep getting smaller unless we're able to close that. And the governor, made it a point in her budget address that this was going to be something she's targeting to fix. And she made important progress towards that this year with the changes to NJ, which some of the corporate tax changes. But is there enough there's going to have to be more next year, right? We only got half the job done, and the other half may be harder.
Yeah, what is your recommendation in terms of where the state needs to perhaps tighten its belt? Is that the answer, or is it raising revenue? How do you see it?
On the revenue side, we think there's still more to get out of a corporate tax code. Corporations got a huge tax cut from the federal government last year, and they keep recording record profits. But when it comes time to pay their corporate taxes in New Jersey, somehow they're not as high as we would expect based on the profits that they're reporting. And so closing those corporate loopholes to make sure companies actually pay what they are supposed to pay based on the profits they're generating is going to be particularly important as the economy gets more and more concentrated in a small number of companies. But on the expenditure side, there's corporate issues as well. The state has billions of dollars in corporate tax credits that it hands out, and these add up. And unless the state's able to take a much closer look at some of these credits to ensure that they're really generating the economic growth that they're promising, they run a real risk of hurting the state further in its sort of fiscal stability.
I'm going to jump in there and just say I know that the business community feels they've already been taxed very high. Of course, this budget did change deductions that they can claim and reduce those. And so I would imagine there'd be a whole lot of pushback to how you see it in terms of them paying what you call their fair share. But we have to leave it there. Peter Chen, Senior Policy Analyst at New Jersey Policy Perspective. I want to thank you.
Thanks very much. Happy to be here.
Under the Dome is made possible in part by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, a private corporation funded by the American people.